Welcome to Instant Deck Techs. The aim of this series is to give you a short, concise guide on how to build a certain deck. It won't cover every card, but we'll go through all the categories and go over the types of cards needed to make the deck work. Any card mentioned will be down in the description below. The commander of this deck is Orvar the All-Form. It is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 legendary creature shapeshifter with Changeling. It has, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, if it targets one or more other permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. It also has, when a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, create a token that's a copy of target permanent. But if I'm honest, that probably won't come up too often. The aim of this deck is to use cheap spells that target our own creatures, to make an army of clones. We'll be running a lot of creatures with strong enter the battlefield effects, so we can get the most value as soon as possible. There'll be a flicker sub-theme in the deck as well, as it works really well with what we're trying to do. The first section of this deck will be the enablers. There'll be cheap spells that target our own permanents to trigger our commander. I will look for spells that are only 1 or 2 CMC and have card draw tacked onto them. This will let us churn through our deck while amassing a board state of clones that we can then win the game with. Some other spells to look out for are cards that flicker our creatures. While it's not a good idea to flicker our tokens, being able to flicker a creature with an enter the battlefield effect will be fantastic. We'll get the trigger of the creature re-entering the battlefield, and then also get the trigger of the copy that comes into play as well. We really do need a critical mass of these type of effects. I would consider running between 16 and 20 of them. With the rest of the cards to fill up the slots, look for good effects or cards with abilities like flashback or buyback so you can cast them again and again. Next up is dedicated card draw. As we're in blue, this should not be an issue. Half of these I'd recommend running on creatures that draw us cards when they enter the battlefield, as they will work really nicely with the clone effects of our commander, and with the flicker spells. For the other half, you can run some cards that synergize with some of the themes we're running in the deck. So Wavebreak Hippocamp will work well with the low drop instance that we're running. Teferi's Ageless Insight will synergize with the spells that replace themselves, allowing us to draw extra cards, and we should have no issue activating Idol of Oblivion with all the copies that we'll be making. After that, you can also run some of the solid card draw that we have access to by being mono blue, such as Finale of Revelation, Gadwick the Wizard, and Rhystic Study. Moving on to ramp, as our commander copies permanents and not just creatures, we can run some spells that target our land, so we can make copies of them to help ramp us. Rampant Growth and Cultivate eat your heart out. After that, a large portion of our ramp will be the standard rock style package. As we have a lot of spells that cast for a single blue, I'd want at least half of them to tap for a colour of mana. The other 4 can tap for colourless however. In addition to those, there's a couple of creatures that can also help us ramp and work really well with our commander's token making ability, and also the flicker effects that we're running. Solemn Simulacrum will get us additional land, and Peregrine Drake and Great Whale will untap our lands whenever we flicker them or make a token of them. We can also then run some effects that benefit us from being a monocoloured deck, so you can run these in addition to your regular ramp. The last option I'm going to mention isn't exactly cheap, but if you have it available to you, is something to consider. By running extra planar lens and snow-covered islands, it means all of our snow-covered basics will tap for 2 mana, and only players with exactly snow-covered islands will also get this benefit. The lens is quite pricey at the moment, so if you don't have one, maybe wait for it to be reprinted. When it comes to interaction, I'd want to run at least half of them on creatures that we can get repeatable value from. Things like Meteor Golem, Anthem Mutineer, and Duplicant will shoot down anything that threatens us. Sower of Temptation and Agent of Treachery will steal the most broken things our opponents are doing, and Voracious Great Shark counters a spell out of nowhere. These will then go up a level when we start making copies of them at instant speed. After those, I'd look to run some sweepers, in case things are going badly. Blue sweepers tend to be a bit more tempo-based than permanent-based, so it might be worth looking at artifact sweepers to really get the job done. For recursion, we can run a few creatures that help bring us back spells from the graveyard. We don't want to run too many, maybe up to 4. These will be very helpful at bringing key spells back again and again. Moving over to win conditions, there's a few really good cards that we can play. Master of Waves will make us a huge board, and the elementals that it makes will only get bigger when you make a clone of it. If we can ramp it out, Tidespout Tyrant will be fantastic in this deck. With all the cheap spells we're running, we'll be able to bounce anything that we want and completely control the board. We can also use our targeted spells in a different way with something like Willbreaker, by using them to steal our opponent's threats and then make them our own. And if you want, you can also lean into the flicker a little, with something like Deadeye Navigator and Panharmonicon. Deadeye Navigator is a great mana sink and will let us flicker a creature with a strong enter the battlefield effect, and then Panharmonicon will double up every enter the battlefield effect that our creatures make. We can also run Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, so we can start cloning our legendaries as well. Getting multiple copies of Orvar out means that every creature we end up copying will happen again. And if you're feeling a bit stormy, you can run Aetherflux Reservoir and High Tide. Cast High Tide when you have a good amount of islands in play, and then start churning through the deck with all our cantrips. You can then win by shooting an opponent in the face with the reservoir. Another solid win condition is Cura Best the Sea God. While we can't flicker the token, we can certainly copy the token, and then with some of our spells, we can even copy the saga itself. And if you really want to go ham with the copying, you can run some good clone effects. These can be on creatures, but for the synergy factor, I'd want to keep them on instants and sorceries, so we keep getting additional value from Orvar. But one nice thing with clone creatures is that you can copy our opponent's best creatures, and then with our cheap spells we can target them to make more copies. There is definitely a build of this deck which leans into this aspect more, so if you like playing with your opponent's food, it's something to consider. When it comes to utility lands, as we're a monocolor deck you can run quite a few. If your budget allows it, Nykthos Shrine to Nyx will be very good at making us a load of mana. War Room is great in a monocoloured deck as it allows us to draw cards pretty painlessly. And then Riptide Laboratory can help us out by bouncing our commander to our hand if anyone ever tries to remove it, because after all, it is technically a wizard. The next couple of deck techs on the channel will be focusing on the new commanders from Kaldheim. But after that, we'll go back to viewers' requests. So if there's anything you want to see, please let us know down in the comments below, and subscribe so you see those videos when they come out. Thank you very much for watching.